Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by
Welcome to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer, and I'm here with John Ross. And today we are bringing you another episode of Aging Insight. And we are the source for you for information for seniors, for the families that care for seniors and persons with disabilities, because we know that you are trying to navigate through your life and taking care of your own financial needs, medical needs, housing needs, and legal needs. And we want to be a resource for you that comes right into your living room. So John, here we are again.
That's right. We see lots of folks in lots of different situations, and the one thing that we've learned over time is that the more knowledge you have about how to get through this process, the more likely you will to be able to accomplish your goals, whatever those happen to be. If you want to avoid nursing home care, if you want to avoid becoming a burden on friends and family, if you want to avoid going broke in the process, we can help guide you through there. But the ones that have the most information are the ones that are going to do it the most successfully. And that's what this program is all about. It's a way to give you that information. Now, Lisa, we are in a rural area. We've got East Texas, we've got Southwest Arkansas, we've got a little bit of Oklahoma, a little bit of Louisiana coming in.
Yeah.
But one thing that a lot of our clients have in common is farming, ranching, or other agricultural type businesses,
Right.
That they may have been involved in maybe their whole lives, maybe a couple of generations. But these farming operations pose unique situations when you start talking about aging, and when you start talking about how do you pass these assets on down at death. And it can be real tricky because farming operations are unique. They're not like a lot of other businesses that are out there.
Yeah, that's right. So we have, particularly in recent years, we've had a lot of folks that raise cattle, and of course we've got a lot of timberland around here, and then just your regular row crop farming. But the one thing that's often common with these farm families is they may be rich in the land, but they may be a little light in the dollars, if you know what I mean. And a lot of times these families, their wealth and their net worth is tied up in the dirt. It's not, it's not sitting in their bank account, and I don't come across too many multi-millionaire farm families out there, but that land has a real sentimental meaning to the family, as well as provides income, and whether it's their main income or a supplemental income to that family and that senior, it's really important. So one of the first questions I ask a family is, I do ask about the real estate, and if someone says anything about a bunch of land, I'm certainly going to start investigating, is this land being used for farm purposes? And one of the best indications to see if that land is being used for farm purposes is I'll ask them, does the family file a Schedule F with their income taxes? And because this could become an important piece later on.
Right. So one of the, where we see this, kind of starting out with a lot of these farmers, especially as you age, my grandfather, for example, was a cattle rancher up in Oklahoma, and he was able to do that almost to the day he died, where he still, he was still able to get up at 4:30 in the morning and go out and throw a couple of hay bales in the truck and drive out and feed the cows and stuff. And so we see a lot of folks who are able to continue operating those farming operations well into their senior years. The problem is, here's what happens. At some point in time, they do have some sort of health event. My grandfather, for example, he was out working the farm that morning and he had a doctor's appointment that afternoon for a little, what was supposed to be an in and out procedure. But during that in and out procedure, something went wrong and he ended up having a stroke. That stroke caused him to be almost completely paralyzed without the ability to feed himself or speak or handle any of his normal activities of daily living. Well, when you face a situation like that, a lot of times you may need something like nursing home care. Maybe for a little while, maybe for a long time. And of course, Medicare only pays for the first 20 to 100 days. After that, that nursing home can start running $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per month. And Lisa, kind of like you mentioned, a lot of these farmers are cash poor.
That's right.
Land rich, but cash poor.
Yeah, you can't take a square land and pay that over to the nursing home.
Right. Yeah. They don't want it. Even if you could do that, and of course most of the farmer types that we deal with are very proud of that land and they would like to preserve it. And so one of the first issues is knowing how Medicaid or something like that would treat a farming operation under the Medicaid rules if you needed to qualify, say, for nursing home benefits.
Yeah. So, and that's really kind of ties back, John, to when I initially deal with a client that may potentially have farming operations. I ask about how they file their income taxes, because if there's a Schedule F filed as part of the income taxes, in that situation, then I could designate the land and the equipment that is used in those farming operations. I can designate that as being exempt as an asset for the purposes of calculating whether that senior is qualified for some assistance, some government assistance, such as through Medicaid, for their long-term care needs. And if we're talking about a family that's cash poor and land rich, well, if that land is actively used in farming, then a lot of times that the cash flow that can help pay the bills to get the care that's needed can come from those government programs.
Yeah, so this is a huge rule when you're talking about Medicaid. Medicaid does not count the value of an ongoing agricultural trade or business, whether we're talking about ranching, whether we're talking about farming, whether we're talking about chicken houses, or whatever kind of farming or ranching business you have, nothing associated with that business. So we're talking about the land, but we're also talking about the barns and the livestock themselves, whether it's chickens or cows or whatever it is, crops, grain,
farm trucks,
tractors,
the sport utility, like the mules or whatever that you
bush
use.
hog, all of those things that are associated with that farming are not counted towards your eligibility for that nursing home Medicaid benefit, and that can be huge. And yet there's still some problems out there. But before we get into those, we're going to take a quick break. So stick around and we'll be right back.
With my dad, it was in a hospital setting. And in his situation, he fell into renal failure. He also helped us make the decision to be on hospice. I have to admit, it took a huge weight off our shoulders for him to be willing. That offered us a lot of comfort, along with the hospice company itself, but it gave us closure, and it helped us through the entire process.
SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
The Oaks Independent are apartments for seniors who love secure peace of mind and consistency in their lives. Included in the price are cable, utilities, meals, weekly housekeeping, daily monitoring, and a medical alert device. All apartments wheelchair accessible, freestanding homes in a great part of town. Live in style, comfort, and accessibility. Live independent. Find us online or call today to schedule a tour. The Oaks Independent.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioners still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. I'm your host, John Ross, here with Lisa Schulmeyer, and today on Aging Insight, we're talking about the unique issues related to farms. We kind of started out talking about what happens with that farm if somebody needs something like nursing home care. And of course, here's probably one of the bigger benefits for farmers is that Medicaid does not count the value of a ongoing active farming operation.
Yeah, I like the way you emphasized ongoing and active.
That's right, because many times I have had somebody come in and I'll say, well, tell me about what you have, and they'll say, well, I have a ranch out here. I've got this 200 acres, and so this is my ranch. And I'll say, okay, well, so you're running cows and stuff? And they say, no, I used to, but it just got too hard to run those cows. Mm-hmm. And so now I lease the pasture out to somebody else. Mm-hmm. Well, so Lisa, is that a farming operation?
That's a landlord type tenant operation, and that is not a farming operation. So, what happens in that situation is, you're just a passive investor at that point. You've got land, you're leasing it out, you're collecting some income, and that you may be reporting that, but it's rental income. It's not farming income. And that makes a huge difference, because in a situation where someone in the family needs some long-term care benefits, the rental doesn't get the same protections as an active, ongoing farming operation.
Yeah, and the same thing applies to things like timberland. If you've just got timber out there as an investment, generally your investments count against you when you're trying to qualify for something like Medicaid, just like, say, money in the bank would count against you. And so if you're not actually engaged in the farming, that can be a problem. The other problem, and of course with farms, a lot of farmers, they may not actually make any money off the farm. They make income, but after they deduct the costs associated with that farm and the cost of the livestock and the grain and the hay and water and the repairs on the tractor and all of these other things, by the time you get to the bottom, there is not actually any income, there's no net income off that farming operation. And so I have had folks who are in fact engaged in farming, but because they were showing a loss on their tax return and their only other income was Social Security, their tax advisor had told them, well, there's no requirement for you to file a tax return any longer. And so although they are in fact engaged in farming, they're not filing a tax return. And unfortunately, that tax return is what Medicaid is going to use to substantiate the fact that you are engaged in farming. So even though there may not be any requirement to maintain that tax return every year, it may still be well worth your time and effort to do it.
Right, sure. And that does raise the issues, the practical issues that, if you are the senior and that you've farmed or ranched for years and it really has gotten too difficult to actively yourself be engaged in, this is a practical consideration would be to hire someone on or get someone in the family to continue those operations so that Schedule F will appear with your tax return, because there's some really great protections that come with that active farm.
That's right. Plus, there's additional things like your tax ag use and a lot of other things that might keep your property taxes low and things like that. But, you know, for our purposes, we're talking about this Medicaid issue, paying for that nursing home care, because so many of these farmers don't have a lot of cash in order to private pay for their care. So, you know, when your biggest asset is this farm, it is very likely that you could qualify for Medicaid if you needed a nursing home without having to worry about having to sell the farm first, but there's a little something called the Medicaid Estate Recovery Program.
Right, you know, so, you know, when we talk about Medicaid assistance for long-term care, now remember, this Medicaid is a federal program that is administered by each state. And as part of the monies that come to each state, the states are required, it is mandatory for the states to try to recoup the cost that is spent on any individual's care. And now that collection process doesn't start until after the patient has died. So, you know, this is called Medicaid Estate Recovery. The state of Arkansas or the state of Texas is attempting to recover their expenditures on your loved one that was made for long-term care. And so even if the farm is exempt as an active farming operation at the time someone applies for Medicaid assistance, at their death, there is still the potential, if the proper planning has not been put in place, that farm will essentially be, for lack of a better term, foreclosed on by the state in order to recoup the cost of the care.
That's right. So, you know, a couple of things here. If you're planning well in advance, and you have something like farm, or other what I would call illiquid asset, things that you don't plan on selling, that you want to keep and protect, there are some fantastic tools like certain types of trusts and things that you can use to shield those assets well in advance, so that not only will you qualify for Medicaid even if you stop farming, but it'll also protect that asset on the back end from the Medicaid estate recovery. Or on the other hand, if you're one of these folks that has waited until the last minute and you don't have a lot of time to plan ahead, there are still things that you can do. Again, the farm doesn't count against you. You just need to protect it on the back end by keeping it out of your estate. And there are things like ladybird deeds that can be done that will also protect that. In fact, we have a whole other episode on Aging Insight that we did just on ladybird deeds, one of our past episodes, and so you might try to find that online out there if you want a refresher course on the ladybird deeds. But again, the key here is that the farm itself doesn't count against you as long as it is an active farm, but you do still need to worry about how do you protect it on the back end. Now, this is not the last issue we want to talk about with Medicaid, because, or with farms, because there's a few other little unique things, but for that you're going to have to stick around after one more break, so we'll be right back.
All our moments should be cherished. SEMA Hospice provides comfort care when you need it most, with compassion, dignity, and respect. Along with Jordan Health Services, SEMA Hospice provides compassionate continuity of care. SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
As things get older, they require more care. This car and I have seen a lot of miles together, but because I take care of her, she runs just like she did in 1955. That's why I chose the Wadley Senior Clinic, with an individualized care plan designed just for me and a convenient location off Jefferson Avenue. They have everything to keep me running like new. It's not about the miles, it's about the journey. Let the Wadley Senior Clinic keep you happy, healthy, and cruising down the road of life.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana. And there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, Our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
From our first moments to our final days, life's journey should be remembered free of burden and worry. Families should be cherished. SEMA Hospice provides comfort, care, dignity, and respect. Learn more about SEMA Hospice at semahospice.com. SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer here with John Ross. And today we've had a special episode dealing with the family farm as a very particular type of asset that, a lot of emotional ties to that farm and that land, often been in the family for a few generations. Often I've heard stories from families about how that land and that farm operation really, saved them at some point or another from being impoverished, and so it's a wonderful asset, and usually families really want to make every effort to protect that asset because that is their legacy to the next generation. So we've talked today about some of the special issues, and in our last segment, John, we were talking about how if long-term care is needed and a family member qualifies to get some Medicaid assistance, that, the farm, as long as it's active, doesn't count as an asset against that person, but there still needs to be some planning to protect that legacy for the next generation.
That's right. We don't want to get it. We don't want to get eaten up at the end of life to reimburse the state either. Want to protect it on the front end and protect it on the back end. Wow. And of course, with these farms, again, most of the folks that I've dealt with, the farm is a very personal matter, and it's a very it's something that they want to pass on to their kids. And a lot of times people will come and they'll say, well, John, we've got multiple tracts of land, and we're thinking about just giving some of it to the kids now, and that way we don't have to worry about all of these other things. But there can be some negative tax consequences with giving property away.
Yeah, there certainly can. One of the things that, at death, the tax code provides that the property is revalued essentially for tax purposes that, as of the date of death of the owner, at the fair market value on that date of death. And this is called a step up in basis. And this is really important, particularly if there's going to be a sale of the property. But even if there's no sale on the horizon, essentially, normally you'd have to pay a capital gains tax if you sold property. And so the difference between your basis and the sales price, that difference is taxed. So getting that step up in basis, we can raise the value of the property to that fair market value today, and if we sell it, there's no tax due, or if we wait 10 more years and then sell it at that time, but that step up in basis is a very good tax benefit that we want to preserve. So gifting during the senior's lifetime,
that
you don't get that
lose
tax benefit. That's right.
And I actually visited with somebody this last week where their grandparents had given them the farm before they died, and their parents had given them the farm before they died. And so this couple was coming to me to say, okay, well, just like our parents did and just like our grandparents did, we now want to give this property to our kids. But as life has changed, those kids now live far off. They live in Houston and Dallas and in the big cities, and the chances of them coming back to continue farming operations are pretty slim. And so if they were to give this property to the kids and one of the kids was to sell that property, they would have to pay tax on the difference between what they sold it for and what their great-grandparents paid for it, which was probably not much. Whereas if mom and dad were to hold on to those assets and pass them at death, then when the kids sold it, they would pay no tax, or at least very little. And so that can be a huge financial difference between those two.
Well, and of course, you know, John, most of the farmers that I deal with, they'd rather keep as much in their pocket and as least to the government in taxes as they can. So.
That's right. Plus, you know, when you're talking about giving assets away, you know, generally giving assets away is a bad idea anyway. People think that they need to do that to protect the asset, but in fact, when you give assets away, you're not protecting them. All you're doing is subjecting them to somebody else's problems. Whereas with good estate planning, you might be able to leave that property to your kids and do it in a way where it's not divisible on divorce, where it can't be attacked by one of their creditors, like a bankruptcy or a plaintiff in a lawsuit, or even protect the kids from their own future disabilities so that they don't have to worry about the same things you're worrying about now. So there are some really good ways that you can protect that property for multiple generations with the right planning. But these are the kind of things that need to be done ahead of time to really get the full benefit of it. There's always last minute.
Yeah.
But like anything else, you're never going to clean up a mess as well as it would be if you just prevented the mess in the first place.
Right. Well, and you know, you and I have both seen situations where family farms, you know, somebody needed care and the family did not get good advice, and they had been selling off little chunks of their home place, of their farm,
Right.
to pay for care, when if they'd gotten good advice, they could have preserved it all from the very beginning.
That's
so
right.
it's heartbreaking when that happens.
Yep, and so that's our point here today is to make sure you know these little tidbits, and maybe it helps you, maybe it helps one of your friends. And of course, we can't explain everything in just this short little time frame. So if we've left a question unanswered, you can always give us a call during our live radio show, which is every Saturday at noon on 107.1. You can call in and ask whatever questions you have, and of course you can find additional episodes of this show as well as past episodes of our radio show on aginginsight.com, and also additional episodes of this show on KLFI TV. So feel free to check those out, but as always, stick around till next week. We'll have a whole nother episode for you.
Great. See you then.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by